Hey guys, welcome back to episode 12. This one is an on-request podcast. I'm going to talk about how I ended up doing things like podcasts and TikTok videos and LinkedIn videos and Instagram videos, and why I think it's important and why I am constantly doing behind the scene things, how I decide what I'm going to talk about, why I talk about what I talk about, and hopefully that will help you understand a little bit more about maybe why you want to be part of this podcast, why you want to be listening and following along, and kind of the motivation, the why behind what I do as a podcaster and a social media person, and the purpose, the mission, the entire reason that I ended up doing this, because it's kind of a funny story. In fact, it's about an onion tree. So those of you that have seen me or heard me speak in public have heard about the onion tree. I'll tell you a little bit more about that a little bit in the future, but I have always been very proud of being a farm kid. I always loved that I grew up on a farm. And I thought being a farm kid and growing up on a farm was the coolest thing until I got to about middle school. And in middle school, I did a leadership training course as part of student council. And it took me to the big city. I left Eastern Oregon and I went to Western Oregon to Portland. And there was a round table. And we were supposed to talk about where we came from and what we did and what our family did. And the people in the room were supposed to draw a picture about what came to their mind when we talked about that. And it turns out that what I thought, and still to this day, what I think being a farmer is versus what the rest of the world thinks being a farmer is dramatically different. And that was very apparent in about 1994 when I said I'm a farmer, and every person in that room drew a red barn, cows and chickens on their sheet of paper with the crayons that they had or the pencils. They really thought that I came from a backwards world and that I came from a world that was super simple and had no technology or anything behind it. In fact, that we were using technology from the 1920s and 30s, and that just wasn't the case. Now, at that point in time, I wasn't motivated to start doing podcasts and communicating, like in social media. Obviously, it didn't exist at that point, but it was the first time that I understood the disconnect between how we operate as farmers and how the people in the city that buy our products in the grocery store see the way that we function. And the real catalyst came about 10 years ago, and this is the onion tree story. I was going to a dinner with a new produce buyer and a veteran one, and we were sitting at the table, and I was flipping through. Well, the new buyer wanted to see what the onions looked like, what the field looked like, what the packing process, and all of those things, what they look like. And so I took my phone out, and I was flipping through and showing him pictures of our operations and what we were doing. And the buyer was brand new, just months into the business, but he was a produce buyer by profession. And he wanted to see, in all seriousness, he wanted to see the onion tree that the onions grew on. Now, I don't fault him for that. It was a lack of anything that was ever taught to him, anything that the rest of the world and the school system thought was important for him to understand. He didn't know where an onion came from. He thought they came from trees. So I was like, okay, all this time I've thought that I needed to talk about the deep details. So I started with business to business, content on LinkedIn. And my understanding or my thought process was I need people to understand the growing practices and the storing practices and the number of layers in an onion and just the details, the minutia of growing onions and storing onions and dealing in onions. But it turns out that even with the basic consumer and someone who works in the industry, they need to understand the basics of the process. It's just something that we never teach. And that's how I went from creating more detailed information on LinkedIn to ultimately putting stuff on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. And especially if you've seen my content on TikTok, and if you haven't, it's Shea Farm Kid, both on Instagram and TikTok, Shea Farm Kid. You can find that content there, and you can see what I try and show in the behind the scenes. The messaging that I'm showing in these behind the scenes is not to convince anyone of anything. It's to show them what we're doing. I can't ask for more dollars for our product if people don't understand what we're doing. I can't convince people that we care about the environment if they don't know what we're doing. And I can't communicate the important message of what agriculture is if I'm not willing to step up and step out and speak up and speak out about the industry and what we do on a daily basis, the passion, the love, the sweat, the tears, the generational sustainability that exists on a family farm in 2022. There's a lot of things that we do to try and make generational decisions about how we operate. And none of that can be understood by you, the consumer, by you, the listener, if we don't tell you how. And so I think it's important for you especially important for me to take the time. And I encourage other people like me to do the same thing, to take the time and talk about the why. And for me, the why is so many things. First of all, you have to realize that I'm third generation. I didn't know that I wanted to be a farmer. In fact, I wanted to be a commercial pilot. And I kind of went through college and I had other things pulling me in certain directions, and being a pilot was one of those. But my grandfather, who had started farming 50 years prior, had created something that he wanted his family to come back to. That was always his desire and his passion. And I happen to be in generation 3. I'm kind of on the older end of the spectrum. I'm the second oldest in generation 3. No one was even entertaining coming back to our farming operation. And I looked at the passion that I had, like this pride that I had in being a farmer as a kid when I grew up. And then I looked at the effort that my grandfather had made with the express intent of his family being able to come back and to work in the business. And I just felt like I had to come and continue his legacy, that I had to, take the mantle that he was handing to me and move it forward. And moving that forward meant that I had to not just be a farmer, but I had to look at the business in a different light, in a different way. And I had to consider how to grow the business and run the business more like I guess I didn't have to run the business the farm more like a business. Freudian slip there. But I did, because that was my passion. Like being an entrepreneur and growing a business and changing the dynamics and disrupting the process was something that was just always inculcated in me. It's just like part of something. Like when I look at a project or anything that anyone's doing, I can kind of look from the outside and have this critical eye. And so I knew that if I came back to the farm and I could have my impact, that I could make a difference. And now I have to say something really important here. Had it not been for my family, the previous 2 generations being willing to take a risk with me, we would never have gotten to where we are today. I made so many mistakes, so many costly mistakes in the first 7 to 10 years of my career that they, in certain circumstances, I moved us backwards. I didn't move us forward. But in the last 7 or 8 years, we've been able to leap forward. But that's because my family in generation 1 and 2 allowed me to make mistakes. They said, "Hey, Shay, you can do this." And they were understanding of the mistakes that I made, and they didn't pull me out or replace me or threaten me when I didn't do things right. They trusted in me. And so that is why I am so happy to be where I am today, to be communicating with you about agriculture and the many, many challenges that we face on a daily basis. And COVID has only exaggerated and amplified these problems. But I'm going to continue to talk about agriculture, about farming, about the realities of where your food comes from so that you can understand that. You might have seen in the previous podcast, we've done some work with Valley. Valley has come on as a sponsor, and they have been so, well, kind of in the same way that my grandfather allowed me to make mistakes and to learn. They've been here and said, "Hey, Shay, we just appreciate the message that you share. We appreciate the way that you try and tell the consumer and your listeners and your viewers your perspective on agriculture, and you share your passion for what you do. And we want to be along for that ride because we feel like it's important." Valley's saying this. Valley's saying they think it's important that this message is shared as well. And I just appreciate that they've come along and allowed me to do that and not direct me in how to speak or what to talk about or anything like that. They just can see the value and sharing the message of farming and agriculture in 2022. And there are so many things that we're going to face moving forward. We have droughts, we have climate change, we have import pressure, we have labor challenges, we have the COVID era that we're dealing with right now as well. And these dynamics and these challenges are things that farmers and all of us in society have had to overcome and will continue to overcome. But I hope that you can follow along with me in this podcast and learn with me as I continue to talk with some really great companies and really great people about what they're passionate about and how it impacts you as a consumer right there at home when you go to the grocery store, you grab that food off the shelf. It all takes so much work and involves so many hands. And the more you understand that, the more you can understand the nuances of where your food comes from and the importance of food security, the importance of food safety, the importance of worker conditions, the importance of worker pay. And I hope that I will convey that message to you as clearly and as straightforward as possible. And if you ever hear me or see me spinning something or saying something in a way that isn't as transparent as I can possibly be, feel free to call me out on it, because one of the most frustrating things today in watching regular media and hearing people talk is that there always seems to be an agenda behind what they're doing. They don't tell things or say things the way that they see it. They tell you the things the way they want you to see it or hear it. And that's not what I want to be here for. I want to just tell you my truth based on the way that I see the world. And I want to be called out if I'm doing something that isn't exactly that. If you like what you've heard today, if you'd like to learn more about the type of guests that I have, more about myself, like and subscribe. Throw a comment in there as well. It really helps the algorithm and helps me have more reach so that more people can participate in podcasts and communications like this one. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.